In February 1513, a 43-year-old civil servant was hung by his wrists from the ceiling of a Florentine prison, 6 drops, shoulders wrenched from their sockets. He confessed to nothing because there was nothing to confess. They released him into poverty anyway, stripped of his office, banished to a run-down farm outside the city, where he spent his days snaring thrushes, selling firewood, and arguing over card games with the butcher and the miller in a roadside tavern. That man, broke, disgraced, unemployable, then wrote the most feared manual of power in Western history. And this is the detail 5 centuries of readers have skipped. The Prince was not written for princes. Machiavelli admits it in the opening chapters. Hereditary rulers, he shrugs, barely need advice. The entire book is aimed at the new man, the one starting with nothing. The most dangerous book ever written about power is, secretly, a book about being poor. Read it that way, the way its author actually lived it, and it stops being political philosophy. It becomes something closer to a survival protocol. 6 doctrines, buried in a text everyone quotes and almost nobody uses, about how a person with no inheritance, no capital, and no connections builds a position that fortune cannot easily take back. Machiavelli split the world into 2 forces: fortuna, luck, circumstance, the accidents of birth, and virtu, not virtue, nothing moral about it, force, skill, timing, the trained capacity to bend events. His claim, the one that got his book banned by the church for centuries, was that fortuna governs perhaps half of what happens to you, which leaves half. Everything that follows lives inside that half. Doctrine 1. The river and the dike. In chapter 25 of The Prince, Machiavelli reaches for one image to describe luck, and it is not a wheel or a lottery. It is a river. Fortune, he writes, is like one of those violent rivers that when it rages, floods the plains, tears down trees and buildings, drags soil from one bank and dumps it on the other. Everyone flees before it. Everyone yields. And yet, this is his pivot. Nothing stops men, in the quiet seasons, from building embankments and channels, so that when the river rises again, its force is guided instead of ruinous. Now look at what a low income actually is. It is not primarily a shortage of money. It is a life lived on the floodplain. No margin, no embankment. Every surprise, the transmission, the tooth, the cut shift, the deposit, arrives as a flood, because there is nothing between you and the water. The rich and the poor face the same river. Only one of them has been allowed to believe the river is fate. The cost of this goes deeper than the bank account, and there is hard evidence for how deep. In 2013, the economist Sendhil Mullainathan and the psychologist Eldar Shafir published a study in Science that should be read like a horror story. They tested Indian sugarcane farmers twice a year, once before harvest, when the farmers were broke, and once after, when they were flush. Same men, same brains, same month-to-month lives. Before harvest, their scores on fluid intelligence tests dropped by the equivalent of roughly 13 IQ points, comparable to losing a full night of sleep. Poverty was not just taking their money, it was renting space in their heads. Mullainathan and Shafir called it the bandwidth tax. Scarcity captures the mind, forcing it to run endless background calculations. Can I cover this? What happens if who do I owe? Until the machinery you'd use to escape the situation is consumed by the situation. Sit with the cruelty of that loop. The condition that most requires strategic thinking is the condition that confiscates it, which reframes the first move entirely. The first $1,000 you save is not an investment. It earns nothing worth mentioning. It will never compound into anything. Its function is not financial at all. It is a dike, a strip of dry ground between you and the river. And its actual return is cognitive. It buys back the 13 points. It ends the background calculations. It converts a flood into weather. Most financial advice treats the emergency fund as a boring preliminary before the real strategy begins. Machiavelli would call it the opposite. It is the precondition of virtu itself. A drowning man has no strategy. He has reflexes. And notice the timing instruction hidden inside the river image, because it's the part people miss. The dike is built in the quiet seasons, not during the flood, during the ordinary, unremarkable weeks when nothing is going wrong and saving feels pointless. That is precisely when the floodplain mind relaxes, spends the small surplus, and calls it a deserved break. Machiavelli's engineer does the opposite. He treats calm as construction season. The month where nothing breaks is not relief. It is the only window the river ever offers. But a dike only holds water back. It conquers nothing. And Machiavelli had a special contempt, a lifelong, obsessive contempt, for men who fight their wars with defenses alone. His deepest hatred was reserved for something else entirely. something you are almost certainly doing right now. Doctrine 2. Never fight with mercenary arms. If the prince has one obsession, it is not cruelty and it is not deception. It is mercenaries. Renaissance Italy ran its wars through the condottieri, professional captains who rented out armies to whichever city paid. Machiavelli watched Florence bleed fortunes into these contracts, and his verdict, in chapter 12, is venomous. Hired arms, he writes, are disunited, ambitious, undisciplined, and faithless. In peacetime, they rob you slowly. In war, they simply don't die for you. Why would they? And then the sentence that matters. If your mercenary loses, you are destroyed. If he wins, you are his prisoner. He didn't leave it as theory. In 1506, he personally built Florence a citizen militia, farmers and tradesmen drilling on Sundays, because he believed the only arms worth having are your own. Now translate the doctrine out of warfare. A salary is fighting your economic war with someone else's arms. If the company loses, you are destroyed. The layoff email arrives and the entire structure of your life dissolves in a paragraph. And if the company wins, you are its prisoner. The victory belongs to the owners. Your reward for a triumphant year is the privilege of remaining hired. Machiavelli's arithmetic exactly. Destroyed in defeat, captive in victory. So what are your own arms when you have no capital to buy any? There was a boy in 15th century Augsburg who answered this question so completely that historians still argue about the size of the answer. His grandfather had walked into the city as a village weaver. The family was cloth trade, provincial, unremarkable. The boy, Jacob Fugger, one of many sons originally intended for the church, was instead sent as a teenager to Venice, to a trading post on the Rialto. And in Venice, he acquired a weapon that cost him nothing but attention. Double-entry bookkeeping. In Italy, it was ordinary. North of the Alps, it was nearly sorcery. Most German merchants could not tell you, with precision, whether a venture had made or lost money. Fugger carried that one piece of knowing back across the mountains, where it was scarce, and built on it a house that lent to emperors, cornered European copper and silver, financed the election of Charles V in 1519, and made him, by several serious estimates, the richest private individual who has ever lived. His fortune at death equal to roughly 2% of Europe's entire output. Strip the story to its mechanism, and it is almost insultingly available. Fugger's first asset was not money. It was a skill that was common in one place and rare in another. That is what your own arms look like on a poor man's budget. A capability with more than one buyer, acquired with time instead of capital, carried across some border, geographic, industrial, generational, to where it is scarce. The warehouse worker who learns the inventory software deeply enough to fix what the contractors charge for. The waitress who learns bookkeeping for restaurants, ordinary knowledge in an accounting office, sorcery in a kitchen. The border doesn't have to be the Alps. It only has to separate a place where the knowing is cheap from a place where it is needed. Robert Greene compressed the whole doctrine into a warning about depending on others to the point of servitude. Machiavelli said it 300 years earlier and colder. No position built on someone else's arms is yours. It is lent to you, and everything lent can be recalled. Build one arm that answers to you alone, then hide it. Doctrine 3. The envy tax. In 1429, the founder of the Medici Bank lay dying in Florence, and his last recorded counsel to his sons was not about interest rates. Giovanni de' Bici de' Medici had built, from modest beginnings, the financial engine that would eventually own popes, and his deathbed instruction, as the chroniclers preserved it, was a doctrine of camouflage. Stay out of the public eye, never loiter at the palace of government as if it were your address. Give the people no cause to notice how far you have risen. His son Cosimo obeyed it into an art form. The man who effectively ruled Florence for 30 years rode a mule through streets where lesser bankers rode stallions. He dressed like a prosperous grain merchant. He held almost no office. His power ran through ledgers, through the quiet fact that half the ambitious men in Tuscany owed him money, while his public self stayed deliberately, studiously boring. And the one time the disguise slipped, Florence showed him why he wore it. In 1433, rival families whipped up enough resentment to have him arrested and exiled. Not for a crime, for visibility. He returned within a year. His money had never left, and never made the mistake again. 500 years later, an Austrian sociologist named Helmut Schuck spent a career documenting what the Medici knew in their bones. His 1966 book Envy assembled evidence from village studies across cultures, and its central finding is one modern people flinch from. Envy is not aimed upward at the distant rich. It is aimed sideways. Its full force lands on the near equal who begins to rise. In community after community, Schuck found improvement itself suppressed. fields left half-tended, houses left unpainted, because the surest way to be safe was to be seen struggling like everyone else. Now bring that home, because this is the part of building wealth on a low income that no spreadsheet will ever show you. The rich are taxed by governments. The rising poor are taxed by their circle. The first side income you mention becomes the loan your cousin needs. The first raise becomes the round you're now expected to buy. The first evidence of a plan becomes the joke at the table. Who do you think you are? Delivered with a smile, calibrated to shrink you back to size. None of it is coordinated. Most of it isn't even conscious. Shoek's point was precisely that it doesn't need to be. Proximity envy is an atmosphere, and it prices every visible inch of your ascent, which is why Green's third law, conceal your intentions, reads differently at the bottom of the ladder than at the top. For the powerful, concealment is strategy. For the person climbing out, it is structural engineering. Your trajectory is the single most expensive thing you can display, so don't display it. Bury the raise. Let the side income wear work clothes. Keep the plan in the one place envy cannot audit. Poverty has guards. They are called your peers. Stop here for a second, though, because if you've been keeping count, something about these first three doctrines should be bothering you. A dike, your own arms, camouflage, all of it is defense. Survive the river, own your weapon, hide your climb. And a purely defensive Machiavellian is a contradiction in terms. Half a man, playing not to lose. The chapter that gave us the river ends with a very different image. Fortune, Machiavelli writes, favors the impetuous over the cautious. She yields to the bold and abandons those who wait politely for her permission. The second half of the book is about taking. Doctrine 4, borrowed arms correctly. Near the end of his life, Machiavelli wrote a short biography that almost nobody reads, about a man almost nobody remembers. He chose the subject deliberately. It is the closest thing he ever produced to an instruction manual for rising from nothing. The life of Castruccio Castracani opens with an abandoned infant, a baby found in a vineyard outside Lucca, taken in by a priest's household and raised for the church. No name of consequence, no property, no family. By canon law and common sense, the boy's ceiling was a parish somewhere quiet, except that at 14, the boy caught the attention of Francesco Guinigi, the most powerful soldier in Lucca, a condottiere with wealth, troops, and a network stitched across northern Italy. And what Castruccio did next is the doctrine. He did not merely serve Guinigi. He made himself into the man's instrument, the aide who anticipated, the student who absorbed every judgment about horses, sieges, alliances, and men, until the boundary between Guinigi's competence and his own dissolved. When Guinigi died, he entrusted Castruccio, the vineyard foundling, with his son and his estate. The apprentice inherited the network entire. Within years, he was lord of Lucca. In 1325, at Altopascio, he broke a Florentine army in the field, the vineyard orphan, defeating the republic Machiavelli served. One honest footnote, because accuracy matters more than a clean story, Machiavelli embellished. Scholars have caught him grafting borrowed witticisms onto his hero, sanding the history into parable, which is itself the tell. He wasn't writing biography, he was diagramming a mechanism and needed a body to hang it on. The mechanism. When you own no arms, you attach yourself to someone who does, not as a servant, but as an acquisition in progress. You trade labor, loyalty, and competence for the two assets no poor person can buy at any price. Judgment, which takes decades to grow alone, and a network, which takes a lifetime. Robert Greene filed this under his 7th law: let others do the work, but the sharper version runs in reverse. Let yourself do the work inside someone else's structure, and walk out carrying the structure's knowledge in your head. There is a famous piece of sociology that measures exactly why this works, and its finding is stranger than the summary that usually circulates. In 1973, Mark Granovetter published The Strength of Weak Ties, after studying how professionals actually found their jobs. The overwhelming majority came through personal contacts, but not close friends, acquaintances, people seen rarely, known slightly. The reason is structural, not sentimental. Your close circle knows what you know. Same neighborhoods, same openings, same dead ends. New information, the unadvertised role, the client who needs exactly your arm, lives at the edges, carried by people whose world barely overlaps yours. Now hear what that means on a low income, and hear it precisely. If everyone you're close to is also broke, your strong ties are not just emotionally poor in opportunity, they are informationally sealed. The network is a room with the windows painted over, and the cheapest asset on earth cheaper than the emergency fund, cheaper than the skill, is a weak tie into a different room. It costs a message, a question after a talk, a favor done for someone 2 rungs in one industry away. One warning before you go borrowing arms, though, because the doctrine has a mirror image, and the mirror is a trap. Green's 40th law says to despise the free lunch, and nowhere is that law more literal than at the bottom of the ladder. On a low income, gifts arrive constantly. The loan from the relative, the favor from the friend of a friend, the help that comes wrapped in warmth and priced in obligation. Machiavelli saw the same mechanism in politics. The prince who accepts another's troops has accepted another's leash. What is given downward is rarely given clean. It converts quietly into the right to comment on your choices, to call in the debt at the worst moment, to own a percentage of your climb. Castruccio traded competence upward, labor for judgment, service for access. He never traded dependence. Borrow arms from above by earning them. Refuse the ones that arrive as charity from beside you, because those are collars in the shape of kindness. Castruccio's entire fortune began with a single vertical acquaintance. Yours is currently unanswered in someone's inbox. Doctrine 5. Cruelty, well used. Chapter 8 of The Prince is the one that made priests burn the book, and it contains, buried inside its most disturbing passage, the most practical money doctrine Machiavelli ever wrote. The chapter's subject is Agathocles of Syracuse, a potter's son, born about as far from power as the Greek world allowed, who climbed through the army by pure capability, and then, in 316 BC, summoned the city's senate and richest citizens to an assembly, and had his soldiers kill them all in one morning. He ruled Syracuse for decades afterward, fought Carthage nearly to a standstill, and died an old king in his bed. Machiavelli refuses to call this virtue. Slaughtering fellow citizens, he writes, wins empire, but not glory, and yet he cannot look away from one feature of it, and out of that feature he extracts a distinction that has outlived every throne in Europe. Cruelties well used versus cruelties badly used. Well used, if the word can apply to evil, he adds, almost wincing, means committed all at once, out of necessity, and never repeated. Badly used means small at first, and multiplying with time. The offender who cuts once can eventually be forgiven by those who remain. The offender who cuts daily is hated forever, because the wound never gets to close. Set the blood aside. Keep the arithmetic, because the arithmetic is about pain scheduling, and pain scheduling is where every low-income budget goes to die. Watch how people actually try to save money. 1,000 small daily deprivations, the skipped coffee, the guilt about the takeout, the constant grinding renewable self-denial. Cruelty badly used, in Machiavelli's exact sense. Small at first, multiplying with time. The wound reopened every single day, generating maximal suffering and, because the amounts are trivial, nearly zero result. People don't abandon budgets because they lack discipline. They abandon them because they've built a torture device with a drip feed. Machiavelli's instruction inverts it, all the pain at once, one time. Don't fight 100 small skirmishes with your own appetites. Execute one brutal restructuring of the 2 or 3 costs that actually decide your finances, the housing, the vehicle, the recurring obligations, in a single stroke, and then never revisit the decision. Move to the cheaper place once. Sell the car that owns you once. Cut the knot of subscriptions and standing debts in one sitting. Then close the ledger and live. And on the other side of the same coin, let the benefits arrive little by little. He says this explicitly. Injuries all at once, so their taste fades. Benefits gradually, so they are savored. Psychology took 2,000 years to confirm his instinct. In 1978, Philip Brickman and his colleagues published a study comparing lottery winners with accident victims who had been paralyzed and found the result that founded an entire field. Within months, both groups had drifted back toward their ordinary baseline of happiness. Humans adapt to almost any changed circumstance, which means the single deep cut hurts sharply, briefly, and then becomes invisible, absorbed into the new normal. The chronic small cut never gets absorbed because it renews itself before adaptation can finish. One approach spends your willpower forever and returns almost nothing. The other spends it once and returns everything. Cut once, cut to the bone, then never speak of it again. Doctrine 6. The New Prince. Now go back to the beginning of the book. the part everyone skims to get to the scandalous chapters, because the beginning is where Machiavelli hid the lock that all 5 previous doctrines are keys to. The prince opens with a classification. There are hereditary princes, he says, and there are new ones. And then he does something strange for a man supposedly writing a job application to the ruling Medici. He dismisses the hereditary prince in a page and a half. A ruler born into an established state, he shrugs, need only avoid obvious stupidity. Custom and habit will carry him. Nothing to teach, nothing to say. The entire rest of the book, every chapter on arms, fortune, cruelty, appearances, is addressed to one figure only: the new prince. The man who was not given his position and must therefore build it against resistance in territory that does not recognize him, with materials he has to find himself. And look at who Machiavelli holds up when he wants to show what the new man can become. His gallery of founders in chapter 6 is a gallery of the dispossessed. Moses, born to slaves, raised on borrowed status. Romulus, an infant left exposed to die. Hiero of Syracuse, a private citizen of no particular family who became a king so capable, Machiavelli marvels, that he lacked nothing to rule except a kingdom. Fortune, he writes of all of them, gave them nothing but occasione, the occasion, the raw circumstance. Everything else was virtù, imposed on that circumstance by force of skill. Being born with nothing in this reading is not the disqualification. It is the entry requirement for the only category the book bothers teaching. But there is one more component, and it is the one Machiavelli scholars debate to this day, because he states it with an aggression that makes modern readers wince. In the Fortune chapter, he insists that fortune yields to boldness rather than caution, that she favors the young precisely because they are less careful, more ferocious, quicker to act before conditions are perfect. Audacity, in his accounting, is not a personality trait. It is a claim you file against circumstance. The cautious man waits for fortune's permission. The bold one treats her hesitation as consent. Why would boldness matter more at the bottom than anywhere else? A 20th century sociologist found the answer in, of all places, the careers of scientists. In 1968, Robert Merton of Columbia University documented a pattern he named the Matthew effect, after the line in the Gospel, "To everyone who has, more will be given." Merton showed that credit in science compounds. The already recognized researcher receives disproportionate acclaim for equal work, which brings resources, which produce more work, which brings more acclaim. Advantage feeds on itself. The finding has since been replicated across careers, wealth, and reputation, and its implication is a blade with 2 edges. Compounding is indifferent to size, but it is ruthless about sign. The system will multiply whatever position you hold. Hold nothing, and it faithfully multiplies nothing year after year, and calls the result your fault. Hold one small, genuine advantage, and the same machinery that kept you at zero begins, indifferently, to work for you. Which is why every doctrine you've heard tonight has secretly been aimed at a single target: manufacturing the first unit, the first $1,000 of dry ground, the first arm that answers to you alone, the first ascent nobody got to tax, the first weak tie into a room with windows, the first deep cut that freed the monthly margin. Any one of them is small enough to look like nothing. Any one of them is a position. And the Matthew effect does not check the size of a position before compounding it. It only checks that one exists. Fortune decides where the river runs. Virtù decides what gets built on the bank. And the entire game for the new man is to get one structure, any structure, standing before the next flood. Now you can see what the book actually is: a Dyke Against Fortune. Your own arms, concealed intentions, other men's networks, absorbed, pain delivered in a single stroke, boldness as a filing against luck. These are not scattered aphorisms. They are the chapters of The Prince, translated out of politics and back into the condition its author was living in when he wrote them: hunted, broke, and beginning again from nothing at 43. The book was never really about ruling Italy. It was about what a man with nothing does in a world owned by men with everything. There is a letter that survives from that farm. December 10th, 1513. Machiavelli writes to his friend Francesco Vittori, the ambassador in Rome, and describes his days with a kind of bitter comedy: the woodlots, the bird snares, the tavern where he plays cards with the miller and 2 kiln workers and gets into shouting matches over pennies, because, he says, this is what keeps the mold off his brain. And then the letter turns, and the comedy drops away. When evening comes, he writes. He returns home and stops at the door of his study. He takes off his mud-caked work clothes and puts on the robes he once wore at court. Dressed for an audience no one else can see, he steps inside and enters, in his phrase, the ancient courts of ancient men. He reads. He interrogates the dead, Livy, Tacitus, the whole inheritance, asking them why they acted as they did, and for 4 hours, he tells Vittori, poverty stops frightening him, even death loses its grip. Those 4 hours a night became the prince. Hold the full picture for a moment. Fortune had taken everything it could reach. His office, his income, his reputation, very nearly his shoulders. The only territory left was the space between dinner and midnight and what he chose to command there. He had no capital, so he spent attention. He had no army, so he built an asset out of the one raw material fortune cannot confiscate without your cooperation. He died in 1527, still poor, never restored to office. Every prince he wrote for is dust. The Medici are a museum, and the thing he built in exile, at a farmhouse desk with no resources whatsoever, is the only asset in that entire story still paying out 500 years later, including into this video, tonight, to you. So the question was never really how much money you make. The question is the one his evenings answered. Of the hours you actually control, the floodplain hours, the ones fortune hasn't claimed yet, who is governing them right now? If this is the kind of thinking you want more of, the old books read the way they were actually written, not the way they're politely taught. Subscribe to the channel. The study door is open. Bring the robes.